Well, good evening and a happy Wednesday, Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. Hopefully everybody is living in love and joy and peace and gratitude. So glad that you chose to join with us tonight. We are once again in Eckhart Tolle's incredibly self-actualizing book, A New Earth, and so grateful for the journey that we've shared together. This is still the month of May for one more day. And so we're going to jump into our Fully Awake devotion and get today's lesson, and then we'll do an introduction and we'll jump into to tonight's teaching. Today is May 31st. May is the month of understanding that we are not in trouble, that we are in transition. Again, we are in our new devotion, Fully Awake 365. So excited about this. And so today's devotion is called Recognizing Destructive Patterns Quickly. Let's grab our prayer of surrender real quickly, and then we'll jump into today's devotion. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is May 31st. We're going to grab our affirmation at the top. We're going to talk about recognizing destructive patterns quickly. Today, let's read it together. Affirmation. I choose to make the most of this lifetime by recognizing destructive patterns quickly. I am aware that destructive thoughts lead to destructive choices. Destructive choices become destructive behaviors or patterns. Destructive behaviors invite, enable, and create destruction in my life. As I begin to think new thoughts, I am also cultivating new choices, establishing new behaviors, and walking down new paths. So, the feel of today's devotion really is all about self-awareness. Being aware of yourself, your thoughts, your choices, what you're creating in your life. One of my mentors growing up as a teenager used to say to me and to others fairly frequently that people learn in three ways. Some people learn by hearing or observing. Some people learn by experience. They have to experience it for themselves. And some people, unfortunately, only learn by tragedy. So there's a level of hearing. Hearing, really, observing is the highest level of learning because that means you can see and take in the lesson. Experience is a little bit of sleepwalking because we have seen other people do something that doesn't work and we have to try it for ourselves. But then that lowest level is, even though we've experienced it many times, we are still living in things like blame, shame, guilt, projecting onto other people. And so only tragedy gets our attention, and sometimes the tragedy may be too late for us or for those that are around us that those decisions affect. And so recognizing destructive patterns quickly really is just a symbol, a symptom that we are awake. We're awake to our thoughts. We're awake to our divine creativity. Look down about the middle of, about 6 lines down of that first paragraph. It says, we have all headed down paths that were either dangerous or at very least unproductive. Realizing this quickly is the way to avoid a lifetime of pain and resist detours that put our destinies on layaway. Our lives, if you will, kind of like the space shuttle's trajectory to the moon, it's a long path. But if you get off just a little bit and you don't really ever correct it, you can wind up, as we said, look down at that last paragraph of the last sentence of the first paragraph. It says, you can wind up in another galaxy far, far away. So that's a little Star Wars love for those who are Star Wars fans. Yeah. And so this life is long, and getting out of sorts, getting away from our true self that is not corrected after a while really winds us up into places that we never were intended to be. And so being aware of the self, the soul, the thoughts, the mind, our levels of consciousness, what we're allowing to come into us and out from us, is a way that we stay on course with our divine selves. That second paragraph, we give some examples of Jesus offering a quick course correction, offering to help people get back on to the path of loving the self and the soul more quickly. Jesus offered a course correction to the woman at the well, to the woman caught in adultery, to the rich young ruler and young lawyer, to Zacchaeus, the tax collector, to the Pharisees, and to many others. Some received it, made quick adjustments, and found their way back to purposeful living. Others rejected the wisdom or rejected being able to see themselves and continued down a path toward tragedy. Tonight, we set our intention to be quick learners, to visualize ourselves, and to head directly toward the realization of our full potential. Amen to that. Let's grab our prayer at the end. If you have it with you, let's all say it together. Course corrector, with your help, I will recognize destructive patterns quickly, adjust, and enjoy a happy and fulfilled life. Amen. Isn't that just some good practical wisdom? Very pragmatic, but also very spiritual, being aware of ourselves at all times. To know thyself, as Socrates would remind us, really is the beginning of wisdom and really the beginning of peace and happiness. And so we look forward to being with you again Friday morning for our devotion. Always, we have a fun, fabulous, fantastic Friday together. Looking forward to seeing you again for the devotion Friday morning at 7 a.m. All right. Welcome once again to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. So glad that you're joining us tonight. We are an inclusive spiritual community. We are an interfaith community. We are an LGBTQ plus affirming community that realizes that we are bigger than our labels. We're bigger than race. We're bigger than gender, sexual orientation, country of origin. All of these really are temporary designations, assignations, as Dr. King might encourage us. They are external accidents. They should be secondary considerations. The primary consideration is that we are spirit. As Jesus spoke the sermon or his teaching to the woman at the well, that the Father, the Mother, the Spirit God is seeking fellowship with those who will worship in spirit and truth. I'm not coming to your mountain to worship. You don't have to come to my temple to worship. The Spirit of God is evenly present throughout the universe. And so eat what you can tonight. We certainly are glad that you're with us. Change is the only constant in the universe. We all change, but we change at our own pace and in our own space. 2023 is the year at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary of the Christ mind. Some of you that may only tune in on Wednesday night may not hear us talk about that quite as much on Wednesdays, but the Christ mind is not it is not the same thing as the mind of Christ. So the Christ mind and the Jesus man are not always parallel. They're not always in sync with each other. Most of the time from our reading, our study of the Gospels, they are. But there is some culturalization, some tribalism. There is some misogyny, a little bit of prejudicial behavior in Jesus of Nazareth. There is a little bit of xenophobia, a little system of hierarchy, of chosenness to some degree, that he only came for his people, God's people, not for those of different nationality. We are very glad that Jesus of Nazareth, the historical Jesus, woke up to the Christ mind. But the reason that we make that juxtaposition is because so many violently try to establish Christianity as the supreme religion, Jesus as the only way to God, and Jesus is not the only way to God. The Christ mind, the Buddha nature, the Krishna essence within, in us, the Tao, the knowing inside of us is that way to God and to ourselves. And so we must be careful that as we pray for peace, that we don't create violence by setting up religious systems of hierarchy and supremacy and caste. And so if any of that is registering with you, you're a sane person. Or if you're crazy, then we're crazy together. We certainly are glad that you're with us tonight. As always, we encourage you to download the notes in your event description. And we're going to jump into what Spirit has for us. And I have had a little bit of a difficult week. Doesn't mean that I'm drowning in the struggle. But last week ago today was my son's birthday. And so I went to had a little activity with him and asked LaDonna to do the teaching. That night, at about, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. We had the biggest leak over his ceiling. We had to tear down his ceiling. Our air conditioned unit had completely rusted through above his bed, and on the night of his birthday, there is insulation, and he ended up sleeping on the couch, and he's been displaced for the last week or so. It's all good. It's all going to work out, but it's a lot to deal with. It's a lot of expense and a lot of drama. And then today, our second youngest child, our dog lady, a little Shih Tzu, had every single last one of her teeth pulled. About 80% of Shih Tzus have a lot of issues, dental issues, and our vet was nervous that they would become abscessed. They can get into their eyes and cause a lot of problems for them, and so we thought she might hang on to a few of her teeth, but she is completely toothless and still kind of groggy from her anesthesia. Her little tongue is hanging out of her mouth, and I think Brandy's cried 3 or 4 times today already. So send some love our way. We're going to be fine, but we've just had a rough couple of days. All right, I've had a little therapy, and I'm sure that you might be dealing with bigger issues in your life. Yeah, all of our pain is a little bit different. So welcome once again to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. We are family at Spirit and Truth. All right, let's grab we already did our prayer of surrender. Let's have just a moment of meditation, a moment of quietness. If you will, close those eyes and let's take a big, deep breath, if you will. Lola's trying to join me in our moment of what you're doing, sweet girl. You want to close your eyes and meditate tonight? Do you celebrate the beginner's mind? No? Okay. All right, close those eyes tonight, if you will. Woo, we celebrate tonight the beginner's mind. We know that faith comes by hearing and not by having heard. We know that truth is a journey and not a destination. We celebrate tonight the idea that as we empty out, we will be filled. We walk now into the Zen Bardo space. We celebrate now the idea of mystery and not mastery, knowing that as we walk into the kingdom, curiously and inquisitively as little children, we will inherit all the answers that we are looking for. For it's in the name, the nature, the nurture, the person, the principle, the presence, the man and the mind of Christ that we say amen. And so it is. We're glad that you're here tonight. All right, a couple of themes as we're going through our teaching in Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth is our greatest achievement as a human family of being able to recognize our own insanity. Of course, that is arguable with science, medicine, technology. Okay, but our sentient ability of within our conscious minds to recognize when something's not working. It's not working for us. This is not about instinct. It's not about evolutionary survival of the fittest necessarily. It is about the evolution or the unfoldment of our soul, the awakening to our own divine creativity, that we can create a life of peace and joy and happiness if we're able to ask a very interesting question, and that is it working for me? Is it working for us? And if it's not, we have to be able to recognize what's not working. Sometimes it's insanity. Sometimes it is dysfunction. And of course, the recognition of that brings a presence and an awareness that provides us with a foundation of sanity and begins the path toward functionality. All right. The other thing that we have bumped into almost every week is knowing that we are not any type of form, whether that's a physical form, male, female, black, white, tall, short, old, young, whatever those things are. We are also not any thought form. We are not our opinions. We are not our beliefs. We are not our doctrines or indoctrinations. We are spirits capable of these things, but we are not defined nor limited to any of these temporary ideas or realities. And so we are an eternal spirit having a temporary human experience. We are not any of these physical forms or any of these thought forms. That is the ego's desire to define us. All right, last week we asked 5 interesting questions. I'm going to ask them real quickly just as a quick review, and then we're going to jump into tonight's questions. 5 questions from last week. Is there a difference between my thoughts and emotions? Can pain build presence? Awareness, we talked about that. What is the connection between our outer energy field and our inner energy state? Talked about that last week. Number 4, are first impressions accurate? There was kind of a mixed bag on the discussion with that last week. Number 5, should conscious people be held to a higher standard than unconscious people? Father, forgive them, they know not. Should conscious people be held to a higher, at least personal standard than unconscious people? Interesting questions from last week. All right, we sent you an email today or this afternoon with a few of tonight's questions, and see if these spark any interest in your mind tonight. Number 1, do our children recognize and take on our pain bodies? Interesting question. Number 2, is refusing to fight in front of your children actually more toxic than suppressing negative energy? Refusing to fight or argue in front of your children, is that more toxic than suppressing or repressing negative energies? Number 3, if the fits, the tantrums that we throw as children get us what we want, does this behavior follow us into our adult lives? That's a difficult question, isn't it? If we throw fits as children, maybe even as teenagers, and we kind of get something that we want, does that process follow us, that pattern, does it follow us into our adult lives? We're going to talk about those 3 questions tonight. All right, this is week 43, maybe week 44 actually. And we're going to jump into tonight's teaching called The Pain Body in Children. The Pain Body in Children. Welcome once again to Spirit and Truth. We're excited to have a discussion with you tonight. Children's pain bodies sometimes manifest as moodiness or as withdrawal. The child becomes sullen, refuses to interact, may sit in a corner hugging a doll or sucking a thumb. They can also manifest as fits or temper tantrums. The child may scream, throw himself onto the floor, become destructive. Thwarted wanting, interesting wording there, thwarted wanting can easily trigger the pain body. And in a still developing ego, the force of wanting can be very intense. Parents may watch helplessly in disbelief that their little angel has transformed within seconds into a little monster. Where does all that unhappiness come from? The parents may wonder. To a greater or lesser extent, it is the child's share of the collective pain body of humanity, which goes back to the very origin of the human ego. So let's stop here for just a minute, and I want to enjoin you. Let me invite you tonight to try to keep an open mind, glean what you can from tonight's teaching about parenting, especially if you're a little bit old school like me. I'm an interesting combination of new thought, progressive thought, and a little bit of old school parenting at times. And so this doesn't have to be your methodology. Just don't close off completely to it. Let's just be aware. Let's consider the teaching tonight, especially from my experience with both with my parents and with my children. If they throw a fit and a tantrum, we know how to handle that really quickly. And so that is not really what Tolle is encouraging us to do as parents. Everybody has a different approach, and there's not one way. There are many different ways, and each child is certainly different. So just let me recognize that tonight. I don't want you to think that we've given up all of our old school thinking as parenting. And if you have, you'll be right in touch with the teaching tonight. Just consider the teaching tonight. Let's stay open to it. But the child may also have already taken on pain. So we went from collective pain that the child may feel to a specific pain from his or her parents' pain bodies. And so the parents may see in the child a reflection of what is also in them. Whoo! All right, aren't you glad you didn't close your mind? So however you deal with a fit or a tantrum, let's put that aside for a minute. But do our children adopt some of both the collective human pain body, but more specifically for tonight, the pain body in parents? Do we as parents project our pain into our children, our insecurities, our prejudices, our memories, our thoughts, our tantrums? Come on now, let's talk about it. Yeah. Children are not fooled by parents who try to hide their pain body from them, who say to each other, "We mustn't fight in front of the children." Interesting thought tonight. I haven't really seen it quite like this. This usually means while the parents make polite conversation, The home is pervaded with negative energy. Let's just make polite conversation, not get to the root of what's causing a lack of peace or joy in our home, but Tolle offers that can become toxic. It can become a negative, suppressed energy that children are intuitive enough to pick up on. Isn't that an interesting thought? Suppressed pain bodies are extremely toxic, even more so than openly active ones. Wow. And that psychic toxicity is absorbed by the children and contributes to the development of their own pain body. Isn't that interesting? How many of you were raised in families where parents would just fight, argue in front of you, and you'd have to sit down as a family and kind of like, clear the air and then apologize or make it right or come to some type of resolution or compromise. But Tolle is offering to us tonight the thought that it might be actually more toxic for children to grow up in an environment where everyone is always unhappy with each other, but they hide it through pleasantries and pleasant conversations. Interesting thought, isn't it? Yeah, and so wherever it is in your mind, let's just consider these thoughts tonight. Parents often wonder how to deal with their child's pain body. The primary question is, of course, are they dealing with their own? So before you put the mask of oxygen on your child, you may have to put it on yourself first. Yeah, we have to deal with our own sense of pain body that, watch this, was possibly passed to us from the human collective pain body and also from our parents' pain bodies. Isn't that interesting? I know in my life I have some collective hurt from the human family, and also there's some things I'm aware of that are in my own specific family. I think that's in everyone's family. It's just the way that it is. Do they recognize it within themselves? Can we recognize that we have pain before we try to say how do we deal with our children's pain? Okay. Are they able to stay present enough when it becomes activated so that they can be aware of the emotion on the feeling level before it gets a chance to turn into thinking and thus into an unhappy person? Interesting. Now watch this approach. Again, try to keep an open mind. Watch this approach about dealing with a child that's in the midst of a pain body attack. When the child is having a pain body attack, there isn't much you can do except to stay present so that they are not drawn into so that you are not drawn into the same emotional reaction or emotional state. The child's pain body would only feed on that. Don't buy into the drama and don't take it too seriously. If the pain body was triggered by thwarted wanting, again, don't give in now to its demands. Otherwise, the child will learn. The more unhappy I become, the more likely I am to get what I want. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? So dealing with children, whether we believe in being a little more aggressive with dealing with fits and tantrums or not, we do have to stay in a different emotional state. My father believed in spanking, and I raised my children. They didn't get many spankings, but occasionally they got one when I thought that they needed a severe course correction. However, I tried to not spank my children in anger. My father would always make me wait, which was even more torturous. He would not spank me in anger. He would calm down and say, "Go in your room and think about it for a minute. I'm going to come in." But after every time that I received a spanking, every time that I spanked my children, I would always, after they calmed down, I would hug them, tell them that I love them, and tell them that I do this, I correct them for their own benefit, that it was not out of anger. And so if you don't believe in spanking, then there's a right way to do a wrong thing. If you believe in spanking, don't enter this same emotional state as your child when you are correcting the child. And so I don't want to force my opinion on someone else. You have to know what works for you and for your own family. All right, that is a recipe for dysfunction in later life. There's one of the questions there. Okay, is allowing fits to get our attention, to get our emotional reaction? Is that setting up children for dysfunction later in life, that if they throw fits, they get what they want? The pain body will be frustrated by your non-reaction and may briefly act up even more before it subsides. Fortunately, pain body episodes in children are usually more short-lived than in adults. That's interesting. A little while after it has subsided, or perhaps the next day, you can talk to the child about what happened. Ask questions. For example, what was it that came over you yesterday when you wouldn't stop screaming? Do you remember? What did it feel like? Was it a good feeling? That thing that came over you, does it have a name? If you could see it, what would it look like? What happened to it when it went away? Did it go to sleep? Do you think it may come back? Interesting questions. These are just a few suggestions. The questions are designed, of course, to awaken the witnessing faculty in the child, which is presence, awareness, consciousness. These questions are designed to make a child see the behavior. Where does it come from? Is that me, or is it something else working through me? They will help the child, I love this word, to disidentify from the pain body. I'm not my thwarted wanting. I'm not the fit that I'm throwing because I want to get something. I'm the awareness of this fit. Interesting. We could use that in our adult lives, couldn't we? Let your attitude be one of interest or curiosity rather than one of criticism or condemnation. Very difficult, obviously, from a parental perspective, especially if you're outnumbered. I had 2 children. I knew I was done when that second one was born. We're not going to be outnumbered in this family. If you have a large family, more power to you. I certainly don't have an opinion for you, but I know for mine that 2 were all that I could handle. I wanted to give all the attention and discipline and love and nurture that I could to 2 without losing sight of the other 8 or 10 children that didn't get enough of my attention, which really causes older siblings to raise their younger siblings. But it's a very difficult perspective as a parent to not enter into that emotional state with your child. Sometimes it happens with adult children who get under stress or who are navigating difficult life decisions, or as this new cliche is, as young adults start adulting. They start realizing that life has bills and jobs and schedules and deadlines and responsibilities that are new to them. It's important, even having adult children, to not enter into their stress with them, but to kind of be non-reactionary to it. I know that's difficult for all of us to hear that. Certainly I haven't mastered any of it, but I think it's important for us to remember that. It is unlikely that this will stop the pain body in its tracks in a child. And it may appear that the child will not even be hearing you. Yet some awareness will remain in the background, the subconscious mind, or of the child's consciousness or subconsciousness, even while the pain body is active. After a few times, the awareness will have grown stronger and the pain body will have weakened slowly. The child is now growing in presence. What an amazing idea. Isn't that a beautiful approach? It may or may not work for you, but certainly something for us to consider tonight. I want to go over our 3 questions again, and hopefully they're there for you as well. Here are and if you don't, do they have the questions?
Yes, I put them in their chat.
They're in the chat. Okay, and if you don't know how to navigate your chat, you can look at your email real quickly if I read them too quickly. Question number 1, do our children recognize and take on our pain bodies? Number 2, is refusing to fight in front of children more toxic than suppressed negative energy? And finally, number 3, if the fits we throw as children get us what we want, whether that's a toy or even attention in some ways, does this behavior follow us into our adult lives or into adulthood? All right, let's talk tonight, Spirit and Truth. That's a lot to chew on, isn't it?
Alrighty, Miss Jen Stevenson, let's see here. I think writing into the question said personal lived experience. Yes, children do recognize and take on our adult pain bodies. Refusing to fight in front of children is best. Suppressed negative energy will show up in detrimental ways. So I don't know, that's a little bit of a contradiction. Refusing to fight in front of children is best, but suppressed negative energy will show up in detrimental ways. And then she said, this is interesting. When one has bonus children, be careful. Everything that is heard and seen is questioned maybe potentially questioned by a biological parent who will then turn these things into weapons. And I would say maybe who then could turn them into weapons.
Yeah. Interesting answer there, Jen. Isn't that the utopia that we'd all love to be a part of? the utopia or the dystopian reality. Yeah, I would love to never fight or never have negative energy. That is the goal. That takes a lot of awakeness, doesn't it? Yeah, it's something to shoot for. Let this mind be in us, to not fight in front of our children or to hold negative suppressed energy. Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Something certainly to shoot for. I think you're right. Our children do recognize our heavy pain bodies, and something that hopefully we're growing in awareness with. Thank you, Jen.
So your sister, Pastor LaDonna, who, by the way, we had a very, very good conversation last week in your absence, Pastor D.E.
Uh-oh.
It was just the best interaction and conversation, so kudos to everybody. We had a good time last Wednesday night. But she actually wrote in and said, I have a different opinion about parents fighting in front of children. You can't hide everything from them, but you also should not involve them in your fights or try to plead your case to them.
Right.
There are some things couples need to keep private, and I believe it affects the child's security to always see parents fighting. They are not ready for some information. Yep,
that's some good wisdom. I think that's some very, very good wisdom. If you remember, LaDonna, the show, I believe it might have been Leave It to Beaver and Brady Bunch. I'm not sure, but the picture that they painted, back then on television, the man and the husband and wife slept in separate beds. They were in the same bedroom, but they each had like a little single bed. Mr. Brady and Mrs. Brady, they had like a little nightstand between them. Good night, honey. And it was like, parents don't have sex. They don't talk about things. I have a friend who I won't mention. His mother would not even really allow them to say the word pregnant in the house. They had to whisper, she's pregnant, because you don't talk about real life, So maybe there is some balance there, like you're suggesting, LaDonna, that we don't have every knockdown drag out in front of our children, but we also expose them to enough real life to know that conflicts do happen and that there is a way to resolve them without pushing them down further and then becoming negatively suppressed energy. Interesting. So, LaDonna, get out there and watch Marsha Brady or Jan Brady flick that hair a little bit. Thanks. It's great.
All right. Richard answered all three. Said, number one, which is, do our children recognize and take on our pain bodies? And he said, yes, monkey sees, monkey does. And then he said, I'm not saying parents and children are monkeys. But then for number two, is refusing to fight in front of children more toxic than suppressed negative energy? Yes, a parent's suppressed pain body experiences only produce negative energy and vibrations that children readily recognize.
Yeah. So let me speak to number two, then let's do number three. Richard, one of the things that when you were answering that, thank you for that I remember with both my father, with several coaches, with other mentors, my mother, aunts and uncles, cousins, is that it wasn't this way every day. It wasn't this way every month. But several important times in my life, I had someone close to me share a painful story. Say something like, hey, I know you're going through this, but you're not the only one who's ever been through it. And they would share anecdotally something in their own lives that would comfort me and that would make me know that they're a real person, that they've been through some things as well, that they are not, sitting on top of their ivory tower, hypocritically asking me to do something that they had not been through. And so some of that was important for me to see. It wasn't daily. Yeah, it wasn't every day. But I would agree with you, Richard, that suppressing all of it doesn't allow us even to be intimate with our children. Sometimes we have to share. Brandy and I have shared, not daily, maybe not even yearly. We've shared some things that we've been through as a couple with our children that we hope for them. We hoped our children to learn from that and didn't want them to experience some of the same pains. That was an important, intimate moment with our children. I think when you act like everything's okay all the time, really there's a level of relationship you don't tap into with your kids. And like LaDonna said, we certainly don't share everything. That's probably not healthy for a child. But negative suppressed energy is also not healthy. Beautiful, Richard. Thank you. Number three, I think.
Yes, number three, he said, if fits we throw as children get us what we want, does this behavior follow us into adulthood? He said sometimes if not accepted and properly addressed.
Yeah. And you know what? Those fits can really be more about getting attention than getting a specific thing that someone wants. Isn't that interesting? And so, the fits that we throw in relationships, adult relationships, kind of are the same cry for, I want something, but I don't know the right way to get it. And some of that methodology it kind of follows us through. Isn't that interesting, Richard? Thanks.
So I'm going to tie two comments together here. Richard came back and said, look, let us not totally dismiss or not take seriously our children's pain bodies or our children's pain body experiences. Mm-hmm. It is a necessary part of their learning and growth process. Yeah. So we can't avoid all of them. I just really like that perspective. And your sister also came back in and said exactly, sometimes you teach your children how to argue appropriately by doing so in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's can we have disagreements without becoming rude, without being disrespectful? I think we can do it. I think parents can do it. I think even children can disagree with their parents and do it respectfully. And some parents would say, I'm glad you have that opinion, but you are still living in my house, which I've done that a time or two with mine. Yeah, we can do it respectfully, can't we? Thank you, Richard.
Miss Cheryl Handy responded, I'm an extrovert by nature, but during times of conflict, I choose to remain at peace and also take the stance of silence and stillness. We all know someone like that who is a certain way, right, by nature, but then in any kind of conflict or if anything goes wrong, they just get calm. Yeah. But I think as a parent, that parent should not fight in front of children. The parent that is awakened usually takes the lead in repatterning that energy to higher vibrations of love, kindness, and forgiveness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Doesn't it all begin with self-awareness? I love that, Cheryl, about your personality, that you're extroverted, but in tense situations, you tend to get quiet. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Obviously, there are times we need to speak, times we need to act quickly, but there are also many times that if we respond immediately in a tense situation, it sometimes is not the right response. And we need a moment to recalibrate, a moment to go within, or else we will go without. And I love that about you, Cheryl. Thanks for sharing.
All right, let's see here. Fred Hayes shared some personal experience as well. Let's see. To number one, do children recognize and take on our pain bodies? He said, I had a conversation with my adult children. They responded by telling me their perspective of the dysfunctional relationship they had with me. It was a very difficult conversation. Yeah,
and kudos to you, Fred, for having that conversation. My goodness, that's so many of us as parents would become more defensive than open, and we would feel like we were failures. Or look, every parent does the best he or she or they can do with the information they have. I don't know if you remember, if you ever saw the movie or read the book, The Shack, Fred, but the main character was very upset with his father. His father was upset with his father generationally, and so the spirit of wisdom kept saying, where does it end? That's the beauty of forgiveness, is that we compassionately look at the former generation and say, they really were doing the best with the information they had. It doesn't mean they had the right information, as we were doing the best. Very few parents I've ever met wouldn't do their best for their child. We all want the best for our children, but our approach may not be what the child needs, and that's okay. The way we live, it's a learning experience. But it's not too late in our adult lives to recapture the love, the joy that we have with our adult children, if we can be able to say, okay, I certainly hear that. I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way. I'm aware now that was hurtful to you or that it affected you. All I can do is tell you that I love you and I wanted the best for you, and I would never have done anything purposefully to hurt you. But I appreciate you bringing them, and I hope that you can apply it to your life with your children. And that sometimes those open conversations bring us closer together instead of becoming defensive and reactionary. But what a big man you are, Fred, for even having that conversation with adult children. Many parents with adult children would just say, How dare you disrespect me? I put food on your table. I had heat in this house. I kept the water bill on. They start recounting all of the necessities of life. I put clothes on your back. I took you to the, well, what parent doesn't? Scripture says if a man does not take care of his children, he's worse than an infidel and denied the faith. So the least we do is clothe, medicate, feed, house our children. But kudos to you, Fred, that you didn't become defensive, because children need more than just clothing, food, and heat and a place to sleep. They need awareness. They need openness. They need nurture. And as adults, we have to treat them like adults. They're not necessarily being disrespectful when they say something hurt them in their childhood. And it's not always for us to take it personally. It's for us to recognize and say, I was doing the best I could, and I wish I could do some things over with, and I hope you do it better with your children. That's maybe a great answer. Thanks, Fred, for sharing.
Number 2, about fighting in front of our children, he said, I believe it's very toxic to suppress all disagreements. I'm not saying it's okay to inflict more harm.
Yeah. Isn't that... It's a little bit of a Southern thing, and it's everywhere. But, we always want to keep appearances, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's good for business. You don't go shake somebody's hand them a business card and say, hey, I'm really having a rough day. You want to project success and charisma and energy. I get all that. But with those that are close to us, we do have to let our hair down. We have to take our mask off. It's not always business with our family. That's very good, Fred. Thanks.
And then for number 3, he just said, yes, temper tantrums do follow you.
They follow us, and sometimes they work, and that kind of reinforces the adult dysfunction, doesn't it, Fred? I see politicians throw fits. I see basketball coaches throw fits. Yeah, it does reinforce some negative behavior.
All right, Miss Laverne shared, our children are born innocent. They will certainly pick up our pain bodies when they get older and will absorb information like a sponge. I'm sure we don't want to, kind of what you were saying a moment ago, right? We don't intend to harm our children. Right. I'm sure we don't want to fight in front of them, but sometimes it happens.
Sometimes it does what it does, yeah. And we have to recognize it and be more aware to not say things that our children don't need to hear us say, but also to let our children know that we have conflicts and we are working on resolving them. As the same as when you get into a long-term relationship, will have conflicts. Eckhart Tolle, I think it was in maybe The Power of Now, Laverne, he was saying that like marriage is the best, or a long-term committed relationship is the best laboratory for awakening to your ego. Because in that relationship, it's like, I don't know if you remember the Real World on MTV when they stopped showing videos and started showing reality TV. And it would come on and it would say, Laverne, it would say, what happens when 15 strangers stop playing nice and things get real? Yeah. Well, that's marriage, And so when things get real, we become critical of one another. We blame. We project. All of these things become just a part of the laboratory of us learning to wake up, learning to see the self, learning to be willing to seek peace above someone else's mood or moodiness, and especially if you have children, teenagers living in your house, you're dealing with a spouse and children who are projecting their attitudes and their behaviors. Guess what? The way that you recognize them doing it, your family recognizes you doing it. It's just a part of what it is, isn't it? And so, yeah, it's a good laboratory for us to wake up to the ego, Laverne.
All right. Miss Mary Hayes commented and said, I can relate to question number 3. My siblings and I were raised in violence and chaos, and now looking back, I see where my younger sister threw temper tantrums as a kid and still displays this as an adult. The temper tantrums got her my mother's attention, which is why I believe she continued it into adulthood. Mm-hmm. I'm just realizing that her temper tantrums were her pain body experience. Yeah,
even though it may have ruined your day, Mary. Yeah, when Can a sibling ruin your day if something goes wrong? Yeah, we've all experienced that. Although my sister's never ruined my day because she's a perfect sister. But yeah, it probably was difficult to see that. But now, as an awakening being that you are, Mary, you're seeing that those fits there was something deeper than just the fit. Yeah, and so whether it's don't we all cry for attention in different ways? Think about if we listed all the ways that humanity cries out for attention, it might take us a couple of hours, and probably still then we wouldn't get to the bottom of it. That's great, Mary. Thanks.
So Terry Johnson wrote in and said, I hope my comment is not off subject, and I definitely don't think it is. I want to make sure I get it right, though. Help me if I say this wrong, Terry. But she said, being a single parent of 3, my two oldest growing up was pretty easy for me, like as a parent with them. But my youngest, I found a sense of entitlement from her, and maybe she threw temper tantrums, which made for issues between them at times.
Between the parent and child.
The younger Terry and her youngest, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's not all that uncommon, is it, Terry? Yeah, maybe I am not assuming, but I know that in a lot of family counseling that I've been a part of, sometimes the older two kind of rally and have to grow up a little faster because they feel the sense, the heavy burden of caring for a household without another income, without either a father or a mother there, or a significant other to help pay for things and care for things. And yeah, it can be really an invitation for the older children to grow up more quickly, and so they don't have time to throw tantrums. It may happen later in life because it may be an energy that was suppressed in them, maybe having to grow up too quickly. How many times does an older sibling kind of have to help raise a younger sibling? And when they get older, there's some resentment. Like the older sibling feels like, I lost part of my childhood having to be your mama, be your daddy, That's not uncommon either. But yeah, sometimes the younger siblings can feel a little bit more entitlement to certain things that older ones did not, and it can cause clashes, not just with parents, but even with older siblings. And so everybody has to walk their path. Everybody has to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. That's really good, Terry. It's not uncommon. Don't feel weird about it. It's beautiful that you're able to step back and realize it, and maybe it's something to talk about in a very non-accusatory way at some point. Thanks.
Irma commented, she said, woohoo, LaDonna, that was perfect, because children learn from what they see and experience. When they experience their parents in discord, they experience that pain. Some grow up with low self-esteem, they suffer internally. So I think when children experience their parents' pain bodies, they experience the same pain, and they carry that pain into adulthood. So good, Irma, thank you. How about if children experience too much discord between their parents, and then they project that into their significant relationships and basically squeeze all the life out of their spouse trying to create a perfect marriage? What do you want to have? I don't know what a marriage looks like, but I know what it doesn't look like. Let's not be like my parents. Let's not be this. Well, that's what it's not is only half of the recipe, right, Irma? What is it? Yeah, so great. You've learned what not to do. Have you learned what to do? Yeah, that's. I think all of us have to carry that burden, that we saw some things maybe that we didn't want to repeat, but we also maybe left off some things that were a necessary ingredient to happiness. And so it's kind of all of it. Thank you, Irma. Cheryl wrote back in and said, I chose to divorce rather than stay in a relationship of conflict and remain a friend with my ex-husband. Wow. Yet our 27-year-old son still suffered from our divorce, even when we did it in peace and harmony. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Even taking the high road, they still feel that sense of separation. I don't know if I'll remember this exactly right, Cheryl, so forgive me if it's not exactly what it is. Thank you for sharing that from your life. My daughter and my wife are reading a book by someone, I don't know. She might be a professional athlete. I don't remember exactly, but it was like something about the bare naked truth or the now or something.
Anyway, she was married to a man and was suppressing her true sexuality. She was lesbian. They divorced, and she remarried a woman, and her ex-husband remarried a woman as well. And I know that things aren't perfect, but these two couples, like, they go to dinner together, they hang out, they laugh, they vacation together, they have children and something that did not work out for them did not have to end in tragedy. And I think your child, Cheryl, obviously experienced some pain from the divorce. It would have been much greater had it been ugly. And so give yourself a little bit of credit that taking the high road and doing it civilly and still caring about the individual has created less pain in your adult child. And so that is certainly to be commended. And I don't know that sometimes that's not what is the word I'm looking for? That's not possible. There's not the capacity in one spouse, or maybe in both, when a divorce happens, that they can reach a place of peace, because it's so personal. There's so much blame. There's so much hurt that's still happening that is projected into the children, and the hurt of divorce becomes magnified because now they feel like they must take sides, or they must fight one's battle, or they're used as a pawn in some type of divorce hearing or custody battle, or child what is it when you have to pay not alimony, child support. All of that can get so ugly, and parents, I think, don't realize when you have a child, you don't put that child in the middle of the divorce. It's very difficult. And so kudos to you, Cheryl, for taking the high road. Yes, your son has some pain. It could be magnified so much greater. And so that is, thank you for sharing from your life.
All right, a couple more here. Miss Sandra Mack wrote in answering all three. To number 1, do children recognize and take on? She said yes. To number 2, about fighting in front of our children, she said no, because children can sense if negative or suppressed energy is happening in the home. Children are more in tune with what is going on than we think.
Beautiful. Yep, I would agree with that completely.
And then 3, regarding, let me see here. Oh, the fits we throw as children. Apologies. She said, yes, this behavior can follow us into adulthood depending on the emotional maturity level of the child as they go into the real world, which doesn't care about what you may want.
That's an interesting thought right there, isn't it, Miss Sandy? Miss Sandra Mack. Yeah, sometimes the fits that get us things in some circles get us fired in others or arrested. Yeah, it's an interesting take on it. What an interesting life we live, that some of our dysfunction gets the ego what it wants in some circles and gets us in a heap of trouble in other situations. Thank you, Sandra.
All right, so I saved this for last, and I guess this kind of goes back to Fred's comment, but first I'll say your sister LaDonna wrote in, you're the perfect brother. You're a perfect brother, in response to you earlier. But Richard said, one of the most important things a parent can do is to say I was wrong and I am sorry to their child.
I was wrong and I'm sorry. Isn't that interesting? I'll tell you a little story, Richard, about my dad, whose birthday is on Friday, 85th birthday Friday. We're going to celebrate him this Sunday. I received a spanking because a ne'er-do-well usher at our church told my dad that I did something that I did not do, or it wasn't in the same context. And so when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, we were in a nursery setting, and the women's bathroom was propped up with one of those little things that you put under the door, like a doorstop. And we were playing, I think, kickball or dodgeball, and the ball went into the ladies' bathroom. And so my teacher or nursery teacher looked at me and said, "You can go get the ball. Go in there and get the ball and come right back out." So I walked in the ladies' bathroom, got the ball, and came back out. Well, an usher that was minding my business came and saw me doing that and went to my father and said, I just want to tell you that I saw your son going into the ladies' bathroom. And I got a spanking for it. And I don't know if my dad remembers this or not, but somehow either the nursery teacher found out about it or something and said, oh no, that was not his. I told him to go in there and get it. And so my dad came to me at like 9 or 10 years old and said, I want to tell you I'm sorry. I spanked you for something that you did not deserve, and I made a mistake, and I want to ask you to forgive me. And then I said, well, all is forgiven, Dad. Now let me spank you. No, it was actually a beautiful moment. And I said, probably in my little heart, I said, well, I got a spanking for something I didn't deserve, but I didn't get a spanking for about 100 things that you didn't catch me doing. So it all comes out in the wash, doesn't it?
True.
Yeah, that's true to some degree. And so, yeah, it's good for parents. It's good for pastors. It's good for politicians. It's good for all of us to sometimes just say, hey, I was wrong and I'm sorry. I'm going to do better. I've tried to practice that with my kids. I am learning to practice it in other ways, but it's good to say you're sorry and that you'll do better. Thank you for sharing that. That was awesome. What a good discussion tonight. Look at these questions, just arousing all these thoughts all this way. And so there's a lot of different ways to look at tonight's teaching. Take what you can, eat what you can. We certainly, hopefully some of it helped you along your path in some ways. We are going to grab our affirmation, but I did want to just remind one more time that Sunday is the day that we're going to celebrate Pastor Don Paulk's 85th birthday. We have a lot of surprises for him. Some big surprises, some little surprises. Either way, come and enjoy a day of us loving on a person who is an awakened soul, who is partly to be credited for things like this, for things like us even reading Eckhart Tolle. We would not be reading Eckhart Tolle were it not for the open mind, progressive mind of Don Paulk. And so let's come and give thanks for a life well lived, for 60 plus years of ministry in his life that is still going on even today. And so we'll celebrate Dad this Sunday. We'll send you an email as well. I want to give some shouts out to some beautiful peoples. Miss Emma, Sandra, Myrna, Callie, Doreen, Pastor Fred and Mary, Sheila, Donald, Dinah and Brandon Garrett, Glenna, Rosaline, Teresa, Donnie, Cheryl, Terry, Dr. Sharonda B., Pastor Gloria, Ben and Vicky, Miss Anita, Kisa, Terry, Josephine, Pastor Don. Hello, my dear son. I'll see you tomorrow, Deb. Jen, Randy, Ivy, and Margie, Miss Tanya, Oprah Winfrey, Laverne, Jason, Richard, Toria, Irma, Janice. Hey, Janice Gibson, and Carla. Thank you for joining us tonight. If we missed any names, certainly forgive us. It's not something that we would ever do on purpose. Let's grab our affirmation together tonight as we close. Tonight, I'm willing to recognize dysfunction, even my own. If suffering is a normal state of humanity, I do not wish to be normal. If I've created God in my image, I will surrender to the truth that I am created, or I am made in God's image. I am neither an external physical form nor any internal thought form. I am a spiritual being capable of experiencing physical form and the observing presence, open to considering a diversity of thoughts, beliefs, doctrines. My present thoughts do not reflect my eternal capacity. My potential for awakening to self and spiritual transformation are endless. Amen. And so it is.
Lola wants to say goodbye.
Lola wants to say goodbye. She's been so restless tonight and bumping the camera and hitting the table. Did you want to say goodbye to everybody? Are you worried about your sister without any teeth? We need to get her some doggy dentures, everybody. Poor little lady. Have a great night. We'll see you guys again Friday morning at 7 a.m. Go in peace.